Taman pressed his face against the thick glass window and stared at the stars. They looked different here, far from Earth. Brighter somehow, more real. The space station, called Nexus 7, floated in the darkness like a giant metal flower, its arms reaching out in all directions. "Still can't believe we made it here," he said quietly. Hagen stood next to him, her reflection ghost-like in the window. She was small, even for a human. Most people back on Earth would think she was just a college student. They would be wrong. "Believe it," she said. "We're really here. The Galactic Defense Academy." The transport ship shook slightly as it moved closer to the docking bay. Through the window, Taman could see other ships. Some looked like Earth vessels, metal and sharp angles. Others were completely alien. One ship looked like it was made of living coral. Another seemed to be built from crystal. "Look at that," Hagen pointed to a massive creature floating past their window. It wore some kind of spacesuit, but Taman could see scales and multiple arms through the clear material. "That's a Krillian. I read about them in the Academy files." Taman nodded. He had read the files too. Krillians were one of the oldest spacefaring races. They were strong, tough, and very proud. Their skin was like armor. Their claws could cut through steel. Most importantly, they had been fighting wars in space for thousands of years. Humans had only been in space for a few decades. The docking process finished with a loud clang. A voice spoke over the ship's speakers in perfect English. "All cadets, please prepare for arrival processing. Welcome to Nexus 7. Taman grabbed his bag. It wasn't heavy. The Academy provided most of what they needed. Inside were just personal items from Earth. A photo of his family, a small stone from the beach near his home, a book his grandfather had given him about old martial arts. "Nervous?" Hagen asked as they walked toward the exit. "A little, Taman admitted. "You know," she said, but her hands were shaking slightly. "Maybe a little." The docking bay was huge. Taman had seen pictures, but being there was different. The ceiling stretched up so high, he couldn't see the top. Ships of all sizes sat in organized rows. Alien creatures and humans moved around like ants, all busy with important tasks. A tall, insect-like being approached them. It walked on 2 legs, but had 4 arms. Its head looked like a praying mantis, but bigger. Much bigger. 2 large compound eyes focused on them. "Human cadets, Taman and Hagen?" the creature asked. Its voice came from a small device attached to its chest. The translation was perfect, but somehow mechanical. "Yes, sir," Taman replied. "I am Instructor Zeal. I will be your combat training supervisor. Please follow me." They walked through corridors, filled with beings from across the galaxy. Taman tried not to stare, but it was hard. There were creatures that looked like walking rocks, others that seemed to be made of liquid metal. A group of beings that looked almost human, except their skin was blue, and they had extra eyes. "The Academy has been training military officers for over 200 years, Instructor Zeal explained as they walked. "We currently have cadets from 47 different species. Humans are relatively new to the program." "How new?" Hagen asked. "You are part of the 3rd class to include humans. The first human graduated only 5 years ago." That made Taman's stomach feel tight. Only 5 years. Most of the other species had been coming here for generations. They entered a large room, filled with desks and chairs of different sizes. Some chairs were built for creatures much larger than humans. Others were tiny, meant for beings no bigger than house cats. A few looked more like platforms than chairs. "This is Orientation Hall," Instructor Zeal said. "Please find seats marked for human cadets." Taman and Hagen found 2 seats near the middle of the room. As they sat down, other cadets continued to arrive. A group of the reptilian Krillians entered together. They were all massive, at least 7 feet tall, with broad shoulders and thick arms. Their scales caught the light like green metal dot. One of the Krillians looked directly at Taman and Hagen. He was even bigger than the others, with scars across his neck that suggested he had seen real combat. He said something in his own language to his companions. They all laughed. What do you think that was about? Hygiene whispered. Nothing good, Temin replied. A new voice filled the room. This one came from speakers in the walls, and it sounded different from the translated voices. Smoother, more musical. Welcome, cadets, to the Galactic Defense Academy. A creature floated into the room. It looked like it was made of living crystal, transparent but somehow solid. Light moved through its body in patterns that might have been thoughts or emotions. I am Instructor Korath, your strategic combat analyst. Over the next 6 months, you will learn to work together as a unified force. You will study the combat styles, strengths, and limitations of all member species. The crystal being's voice became more serious. You will also learn about your own limitations. Every species has them. The key to effective combat is understanding what you can and cannot do. Taman noticed how other cadets were looking at the humans in the room. There were maybe 20 humans total, scattered among hundreds of alien beings. Some looks were curious, others seemed dismissive. The big Krillian from earlier was definitely in the dismissive category. Your training will be conducted in mixed species groups, Instructor Korath continued. This is not just for education. In real combat situations, you will fight alongside beings very different from yourselves. You must learn to trust each other. Trust, Taman thought. That might be the hardest lesson of all. Physical combat training begins tomorrow at 0800 station time. Today, you will receive your room assignments and basic orientation materials. Questions. A Krillian raised one clawed hand. Instructor, will there be separate training levels for different species? Some of us are naturally more suited for combat than others. Instructor Korath's crystal body pulsed with different colors. All cadets will train together regardless of species. The Academy believes that diversity of approach strengthens all participants. The Krillian sat down, but Taman could see he wasn't satisfied with that answer. After the orientation, cadets began filing out to find their rooms. Taman and Hygiene walked together, following signs written in dozens of different languages and symbol systems. Did you hear what that Krillian said? Hygiene asked. About some species being more suited for combat. Yeah, Taman shifted his bag to his other shoulder. I think we're going to have to prove ourselves here. Good thing we're ready for that. Taman looked at his small companion and smiled. Pangaea was barely 5 feet tall and looked like she weighed maybe 100 pounds. Most of the alien cadets probably saw her as fragile. They had no idea she had been fighting since she was 6 years old. They had no idea what humans could really do. The corridor split ahead of them. Signs indicated that male and female dormitories were in different directions. See you tomorrow morning, Hygiene said. Bright and early, try to get some sleep. You too. As Taman walked toward his room, he thought about tomorrow's training. He wondered what the instructors expected from humans. He wondered what the other cadets thought humans could do in a fight. Most of all, he wondered how long it would take before someone found out. Behind him, in the distance, he could hear Krillian voices speaking in their native language. The tone was mocking, dismissive. Taman smiled to himself as he found his room. Tomorrow was going to be very interesting. The training hall was bigger than 3 football fields put together. The ceiling stretched up into darkness, and the walls were covered with padding that looked like it could stop a tank. Weapons racks lined the sides, filled with training gear. From dozens of different worlds, Taman stood with the other cadets in a large circle. Everyone wore the same gray training uniform, but the differences between species were still obvious. The Krillians looked like walking tanks. A group of blue-skinned Altarians moved with liquid grace. The rock-like Gorvani stood perfectly still, like statues, and then there were the humans. 20 of them scattered through the crowd of 200 alien cadets. They looked small, soft, fragile. Today, we begin combat assessment, Instructor Zeal announced. His insect-like voice carried clearly through the huge space. You will work in mixed groups. You will learn each other's strengths and weaknesses, Instructor. Korath floated nearby, light patterns moving through her crystal body. Remember, this is not about winning or losing. This is about understanding your place in a galactic military structure. Temin was assigned to Group 7. As the names were called, he watched his teammates gather. 2 Krillians, including the big scarred one from yesterday, an Altarian female with silver markings on her blue skin, a Gorvani that looked like a walking boulder, and 3 other humans, including Hygiene. The big Krillian stepped forward as soon as the group formed. I am Vorth of the Western clans. I have fought in 7 real battles before coming here. He looked around the group, his yellow eyes stopping on each human face. What combat experience do you small ones have? One of the human cadets, a young man named Jinwoo, spoke up. I served 2 years in Earth's Planetary Defense Force. Planetary defense, Vorth repeated, like the words tasted bad. Fighting other humans then, with projectile weapons, I assume. Some, Jinwoo said. His face was turning red. And you? Vorth's gaze fell on Temin. 3 years military service, Temin replied calmly. Also fighting humans, yes. Vorth made a sound that might have been laughter. And the little female, Hyjin, looked up at the massive reptilian. She barely came up to his chest. I studied martial arts. This time Vorth definitely laughed. Martial arts? Against other tiny humans, I suppose. That's right, Hyjin said. Her voice was quiet, but something in her tone made Temin pay attention. The Altarian stepped forward gracefully. Perhaps we should focus on the training exercises, rather than comparing backgrounds. Good idea, said the Gorvani. His voice sounded like rocks grinding together. We are here to learn. But Vorth wasn't finished. No, I think this is important. Look around you. He gestured with one clawed hand toward the other groups. Every species here has natural advantages. The Altarians are fast and flexible. The Gorvani are nearly indestructible. My people have strength, armor, and claws. He looked down at the humans again. What do you have? You're slow compared to Altarians. Weak compared to Krillians. Fragile compared to Gorvani. Your skin tears easily. Your bones break. You have no natural weapons. The other cadets in nearby groups were starting to listen. Training exercises had stopped as aliens turned to watch. The discussion. Every species has value, Jinwoo said, but his voice lacked confidence. Do they? Vorth asked. What is your value in combat? Can you lift heavy weapons? Can you survive in harsh environments? Can you take damage and keep fighting? Temin felt anger building in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. Getting emotional would only prove Vorth's point. Maybe, Vorth continued, humans would be better suited for support roles. Communications, medical support, technical work. Leave the actual fighting to species that evolved for it. More aliens were gathering around now. Some looked uncomfortable with Vorth's words, but others were nodding in agreement. Temin could see it in their eyes. They thought humans were weak. That's enough, the Altarian said firmly. We should respect all members of our group. Respect must be earned, replied, and it should be based on reality, not wishful thinking. Instructor Zeal approached the group. Is there a problem here? No problem, Vorth said quickly. We were just discussing natural combat abilities. Perhaps a small demonstration would be educational. The instructor's compound eyes focused on the Krillian. What kind of demonstration? Simple grappling. No weapons. Just to show the natural differences between species, Vorth looked at Temin. This one claims military experience. Let him prove that humans belong in combat training. Pamian felt every eye in the training hall turn toward him. The conversation had grown loud enough to attract attention from across the entire space. Even cadets from other groups had stopped their exercises to watch. I don't think that's necessary, Temin said. Of course you don't, Vorth replied, but how else will we know if humans can actually contribute to galactic defense? Instructor Korath floated over to join them. Light patterns swirled faster through her crystal body. This is not a competition between species, isn't it? Vorth asked. We will all serve together someday. We need to know each other's capabilities. If humans cannot handle basic physical challenges, Shouldn't they be assigned accordingly? The instructor looked at Taemin. Do you wish to participate in this demonstration? Taemin looked around the circle of faces. Alien eyes stared at him, with mixtures of curiosity, doubt, and pity. Even some of the other humans looked uncertain, but not Hyjin. She met his gaze and gave the tiniest nod. It's okay, Taemin said. A demonstration might be useful. Excellent, Vorth said. His scarred face showed satisfaction. Basic grappling rules. First to yield, loses. Safety protocols in place, of course. Instructor Zeal's mandibles clicked together nervously. Very well, clear the center area. All other cadets observe from the perimeter. As the crowd formed a large circle, Taemin pulled off his training jacket. Underneath, he looked even smaller compared to Vorth. The Krillian was easily twice his weight, with natural armor plating and muscles like steel cables. This won't take long, Vorth announced to the watching crowd. But it will be educational. Hyjin moved close to Taemin as he prepared. Remember what Master Kim always said, she whispered. Taemin nodded. Master Kim had taught them both years ago in a small gym in Seoul. The old man's favorite saying came back to him. The tree that bends in the storm survives while the mighty oak breaks. You don't have to prove anything, Jinwoo said quietly. Yes, I do, Taemin replied. We all do. The instructors activated safety fields around the demonstration area. Energy barriers would prevent serious injury, but everything else was real. Vorth stepped into the circle and raised his arms. His claws gleamed under the training hall lights. Ready to learn your place? Human Taemin stepped forward. He looked small and helpless in the center of the circle, surrounded by hundreds of watching aliens. Most of them expected this to be over quickly. They were about to learn something about humans, something important. Ready? Taemin said. The demonstration was about to begin. The training hall fell completely silent. 200 cadets formed a perfect circle around the demonstration area. Taemin had never felt so many eyes watching him at once. Some faces showed curiosity, others showed pity. A few looked excited, like they were about to watch something entertaining. Vorth stretched his massive arms above his head. His scales caught the light like polished metal. When he flexed his claws, they made small clicking sounds against each other. Don't worry, little human, Vorth called out loud enough for everyone to hear. I will try not to hurt you too badly. Some of the alien cadets laughed. Taemin noticed that most of the humans in the crowd looked worried. Jinwoo was biting his lip. Another human cadet named Minho looked like he wanted to leave, but Hyjin watched with calm eyes. She stood perfectly still, hands at her sides. Instructor Zeal raised one of his forearms. Basic grappling rules. No strikes, no weapons. First to yield or be immobilized loses. Safety fields are active. His compound eyes focused on both fighters. Begin when ready. Vorth dropped into a combat stance. His legs spread wide, arms out, ready to grab. Everything about his posture said he expected an easy victory. Come on then, he said to Taemin. Show us what humans can do. Taemin moved to the center of the circle. Next to Vorth, he looked like a child, challenging an adult. The size difference was enormous. Last chance to back down, Vorth offered. No shame in admitting your limits. I'm ready, Taemin said quietly. Vorth shrugged his massive shoulders. Your choice. The Krillian moved first. He lunged forward with surprising speed for something so big. His arms reached out to grab Taemin in what looked like a bear hug that would end the match immediately. Taemin dodged to the left. Vorth's claws missed him by inches. Fast enough, Vorth said, sounding pleased. But you can't run forever. He tried again, this time swinging his right arm in a wide arc. If it connected, it would sweep Taemin off his feet easily. But Taemin ducked under the arm and moved away again. The watching crowd began to murmur. Some aliens looked impressed that the human was avoiding Vorth's attacks. Others looked impatient, like they wanted to see the match end quickly. Stop running around, Vorth called out. Fight me properly. But Taemin kept moving. He circled around Vorth, always staying just Out of reach, when the Krillian lunged left, Taemin went right. When Vorth tried to corner him, Taemin slipped away. To most of the watching aliens, it looked like desperate defense. The human was obviously outmatched and just trying to avoid the inevitable defeat. Heijin saw something different. She noticed how Taemin's breathing stayed steady, how his movements weren't random. He was testing something. Each time Vorth attacked, Taemin learned a little more. How fast could the big alien move? How well could he change direction? What happened when he missed an attack? Vorth was getting frustrated. "Stand still and fight," he roared. He charged forward with both arms spread wide, trying to trap Taemin against the edge of the circle. For a moment, it looked like it would work. The human had nowhere to run. Then Taemin dropped low and rolled between Vorth's legs. The Krillian stumbled forward, off balance from his own momentum. The crowd gasped. Several aliens looked surprised. Vorth spun around, his yellow eyes blazing with anger. "Lucky," he snarled. "Maybe," Taemin agreed. This time Vorth was more careful. Instead of charging, he advanced slowly, arms ready to grab from any angle. His natural reach advantage meant Taemin couldn't stay away forever. "Getting tired yet, little human?" asked. "Your species isn't built for long fights." Taemin said nothing. He kept circling, but the circle was getting smaller now. Vorth was learning too, cutting off escape routes. Finally, Vorth managed to grab Taemin's left wrist. His clawed hand closed around it like a metal trap. "Got you," Vorth announced triumphantly. The watching aliens leaned forward. This was it. The demonstration was about to end with a predictable result. Vorth pulled Taemin toward him, ready to wrap his other arm around the human and squeeze until he yielded. It should have been simple, but something unexpected happened. Instead of trying to pull away, Taemin moved with Vorth's pull. He stepped closer to the big alien, inside his reach. Before Vorth could react, Taemin's free hand grabbed the Krillian's wrist in return. For a moment, they stood locked together, each holding the other's arm. "What are you doing?" Vorth asked, confused. "Learning," Taemin replied. Vorth tried to use his strength advantage to force Taemin down. His muscles strained against his scales as he pushed. But Taemin didn't fight strength with strength. Instead, he shifted his weight and twisted. Suddenly, Vorth found himself being pulled off balance. Again, the Krillian took a stumbling step to catch himself. As he did, Taemin moved with him, staying close, keeping their arms locked together. "Stop moving around," Vorth demanded. But now they were dancing, and Taemin was leading. Every time Vorth tried to use his size and strength, the human flowed with the movement and turned it into something else. The watching crowd was getting more interested now. This wasn't what they had expected to see. The human wasn't winning, but he wasn't losing either. And he didn't look desperate anymore. He looked focused. Instructor Korath's crystal body pulsed with faster light patterns. "Interesting," she said to Instructor Zeal. "What is interesting?" Zeal asked. "The human is not fighting the way we expected." "How so?" "Watch his feet, his balance. He is not trying to overpower his opponent. He is studying him." In the circle, Vorth was getting more frustrated. Every attack he tried seemed to slide off the human somehow. When he pushed, Taemin moved with the push. When he pulled, Taemin flowed with the pull. "Fight me properly," Vorth shouted. Several of the watching Krillians called out encouragement in their own language. They wanted to see their clanmate crush the weak human. Vorth decided to end this. He planted his feet firmly and used all his strength to lift Taemin off the ground. If he could get the human in the air, he could slam him down and pin him. His powerful arms flexed. His scales rippled with muscle. Slowly, Taemin's feet came off the ground. The crowd held its breath. This had to be the end. But as Vorth lifted him up, Taemin did something that made several aliens gasp out loud. He smiled. Not a worried smile, not a desperate smile, a confident smile. Like he had been waiting for exactly this moment. Vorth, suddenly, realized he might have made a mistake. But it was too late to put the human down safely now. He was committed to the lift. In the watching crowd, Heijin allowed herself a small smile too. The real fight was about to begin. Taemin had spent the first part of the match learning everything he could about his opponent. How Vorth moved, how he thought, what he expected. Now it was time to show the Krillian what humans had learned during their long history of fighting without claws, armor, or natural weapons. It was time to show them what made humans dangerous. Time seemed to slow down as Vorth lifted Taemin into the air. The watching crowd leaned forward. This was the moment they had all been waiting for. The big Krillian would slam the small human down and end this demonstration. Vorth's yellow eyes gleamed with satisfaction. His powerful arms held Taemin high above the ground, ready to drive him down onto the padded floor. Now you learn your place, human, Vorth declared loudly. But something was wrong. Taemin wasn't struggling. He wasn't trying to break free. Instead, he was completely relaxed in Vorth's grip, like he was exactly where he wanted to be, and he was still smiling. Vorth hesitated for just a moment, confused by the human's calm reaction. That moment of confusion was all Taemin needed. What happened next was so fast that most of the watching aliens couldn't follow it. 1 second, Vorth was holding Taemin in the air, completely in control. The next second, everything changed. Taemin's hands moved to Vorth's wrists. But instead of trying to break the grip, he used it as an anchor point. His legs came up and wrapped around Vorth's right arm. Suddenly, the human wasn't being held. He was holding on. "What are you?" Vorth started to say. Then Taemin's body twisted, and physics took over. All of the human's weight was now pulling on Vorth's arm at an angle the joint wasn't designed to handle. The Krillian's natural armor meant nothing. His thick muscles meant nothing. The leverage was against him. Vorth tried to shake Taemin off, but that only made it worse. Every movement put more pressure on his arm joint, and the human wasn't letting go. "Release me," Vorth demanded. Instead, Taemin adjusted his position slightly. The pressure on Vorth's elbow increased dramatically. The big Krillian's eyes went wide with shock. For the first time in the fight, he looked worried in the watching. Crowd aliens began to murmur in surprise. This wasn't what they had expected to see. The human was somehow controlling the much larger opponent. Heijin watched with calm eyes, but inside, she felt proud. Taemin was using everything they had learned together. Years of training in small gyms on Earth. Learning how to fight opponents, bigger and stronger than themselves. "How is he doing that?" asked Minho, one of the other human cadets. "Leverage," Heijin replied quietly, "and patience." Vorth tried to use his free arm to grab Taemin and pull him off. But the human's position made that impossible. Every time Vorth reached for him, Taemin shifted slightly, staying just out of reach while maintaining the lock on the Krillian's arm. "This is impossible," Vorth growled. "You're too small, too weak." "Size doesn't matter," Taemin said calmly. "Position matters." Vorth planted his feet and tried to lift Taemin again, hoping to slam him down. But now the human's body weight was working against the joint of Vorth's arm. The harder he tried to lift, the more pressure went on his elbow. A sound of pain escaped from Vorth's throat. It was the first time anyone in the training hall had heard a Krillian make that noise. The watching crowd was getting more excited now. Aliens were talking to each other in a dozen different languages, all asking the same question. How was the tiny human controlling the massive Krillian? Instructor Korath's crystal body was pulsing with rapid light patterns. "Fascinating," she said to Instructor Zeal. "What is happening?" Zeal asked. His compound eyes were focused intently on the demonstration. "The human is using mechanical advantage. He has turned his opponent's strength against him." "Is that possible?" "Apparently, it is." In the circle, Vorth was starting to panic. He had expected an easy victory over a weak human. Instead, he found himself trapped by someone half his size. Every movement he made seemed to give Taemin more control. "Let go of me," Vorth demanded. "Yield," Taemin replied simply. "Never." Vorth tried a different approach. He threw himself sideways, hoping to slam Taemin against the ground. But the human rode the movement like a wave, adjusting his position to maintain the lock while avoiding damage. When they hit the padded floor, Vorth was on bottom and Taman was still attached to his arm. The pressure on the Krillian's joint increased even more. Now Vorth was truly worried. The pain in his arm was getting worse, and nothing he tried could break the human's grip. Worse, he was starting to tire from all the struggling, while seemed perfectly calm. "This is not how combat works," Vorth said through gritted teeth. "This is exactly how combat works," Taman replied. "You just never learned to fight someone who studied you first." The truth was becoming clear to everyone. Watching, the first part of the fight hadn't been desperate defense by a weak human, it had been careful observation by a skilled fighter. While Vorth had been showing off and playing to the crowd, Taman had been learning how the Krillian moved, how he thought, what he expected from an opponent. Now Taman was using all that information. Vorth tried rolling the other way. Taman moved with him smoothly, never losing position. The human seemed to predict every movement before it happened. "How do you know what I'm going to do?" Vorth asked, frustration clear in his voice. "Because you're doing exactly what I expected you to do," Taman answered. "Big, strong opponents always do the same things. They try to use strength, they get frustrated when strength doesn't work, they make mistakes." As if to prove his point, Vorth made another mistake. He tried to grab Taman with his free hand, overextending his reach. Taman immediately adjusted his position, putting even more pressure on the trapped arm. This time, Vorth couldn't hide his pain. He made a sound that caused several Krillians in the crowd to step forward in alarm. "Enough," called one of them. "Release him," but Instructor Zeal raised an arm to stop any intervention. The demonstration continues until someone yields. The pressure on Vorth's arm was becoming unbearable. His natural armor and thick muscles meant nothing against this type of attack. The human had found the one weak point that couldn't be protected, the joint itself. "Yield," Taman said again, his voice still calm. "I am Vorth of the Western clans," the Krillian replied through gritted teeth. "I do not yield to weaklings." "Then, you're going to get hurt," Taman warned. For a moment, the training hall was completely silent. Everyone could see what was about to happen. Vorth's pride would not let him give up, but his arm couldn't take much more pressure. Something was going to break. In the crowd, other Krillians looked worried. Some of the human cadets looked scared. Even the instructors seemed uncertain about how this would end. Only Hygiene looked calm. She knew Taman would never seriously hurt an opponent unless he had no choice. But she also knew he wouldn't release the hold until Vorth accepted reality. The question was, would Vorth's pride or his arm give out first? The answer came with a sound that echoed through the entire training hall. Crack. The sound of Vorth's arm breaking echoed through the training hall like a gunshot. For a moment, nobody moved, nobody spoke. 200 cadets stared in complete shock at what they had just witnessed. The massive Krillian warrior lay on the padded floor, holding his broken arm, and making sounds of pain that nobody had ever heard from his species before. Above him, Taman immediately released the hold and moved away, his hands raised to show he was no longer a threat. "Medic Instructor," Zeal called out, his voice cutting through the silence. Medical teams rushed into the circle. Aliens with scanner, devices and healing equipment surrounded Vorth, checking his injury. Their movements were quick and professional, but their faces showed surprise. They weren't used to treating Krillians with broken bones. "How bad is it?" Instructor Korath asked as she floated over to the medical team. "Clean break of the radius and ulna," replied the lead medic, a tall blue creature with extra arms designed for medical work. "Painful, but it will heal completely with proper treatment." Taman stood at the edge of the circle, watching the medical team work. His face showed concern, not triumph. Around him, alien cadets stared like they were seeing him for the first time. "I didn't mean for it to break," Taman said quietly to Instructor Zeal. "I warned him to yield." "We heard," Zeal replied. His compound eyes studied the human carefully. "You maintained control throughout the demonstration. The injury occurred because your opponent refused to acknowledge defeat. In the crowd, the other Krillians looked confused and angry. Their champion, their strongest warrior, had been defeated by someone they considered weak and fragile. It didn't make sense to them. "This is impossible," one of them said loudly. "Humans don't have the strength to break Krillian bones." "No," said Hyjin, stepping forward from the crowd. "We don't." All eyes turned to her. The small human female looked even more fragile than Temin, barely coming up to most aliens' chests. "Then how?" demanded the Krillian who had spoken. Hyjin walked to the center of the circle, where Temin still stood. "May I explain, instructors?" Instructor Korith's crystal body pulsed with interested light patterns. "Please do." Temin didn't break Vort's arm with strength, Hyjin began, her voice carrying clearly through the silent hall. "He broke it with leverage and technique, and most importantly, with restraint." "Restraint?" asked Instructor Zeal. "Yes, for the first half of the fight, Temin was holding back. He was studying Vorth, learning his patterns, waiting for the right moment. He could have ended the fight much earlier." The alien cadets looked skeptical. How could the tiny human have ended the fight against a Krillian warrior? "Show them," Hyjin said to Temin. Temin shook his head. "I don't want to hurt anyone else." "You won't just demonstrate the technique?" Slowly, Instructor Korith moved closer. "This would be educational. Please proceed." Reluctantly, Temin nodded. "I need a volunteer, someone who won't panic." The Altarian from their group stepped forward. Her blue skin and silver markings caught the light as she moved with liquid grace. "I will volunteer." "Thank you, Nara," Temin said. "Just stand normally." The Altarian stood in the center of the circle. Temin approached her slowly, his movements deliberate and careful. "When Vorth first grabbed my wrist," Temin explained, "I could have done this." He reached out and gently took Nara's wrist, the same way Vorth had grabbed his. Then, moving very slowly, he showed how he could have twisted her arm and dropped her to the ground in one smooth motion. "But that would have hurt him immediately," Temin continued, helping Nara back to her feet. "Instead, I chose to study him first." He demonstrated several other techniques, all performed slowly and safely with Nara's cooperation. Each one showed how a smaller opponent could control a larger one using leverage, timing, and knowledge of anatomy. "You see," Hyjin explained. To the watching crowd, humans didn't evolve with natural weapons like claws or armor like scales. We had to learn to fight without those advantages. So we developed something else. "What?" asked the Gorvoni from their group, his rocky voice curious. "We learned to think during combat, to adapt, to use our opponent's strength against them." Instructor Korith's light patterns were moving rapidly now. "Fascinating. Your species developed tactical thinking as a survival trait." "That's right," Hyjin said. "We're not the strongest or fastest or toughest, but we're very good at finding weaknesses and exploiting them." The medical team was finishing their work on Vorth. They had set his broken bones and given him medication for the pain. The big Krillian sat up slowly, cradling his arm in a healing brace. "I don't understand," he said, looking at Temin with confused eyes. "You felt weak when I grabbed you. How did you become so strong?" "I was never weak," Temin replied gently. "And I never became strong. I just stopped letting you control the fight." Vorth stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he began to nod. "You were teaching me? Teaching you. The first part of the fight, you were showing me what I expected to see. A weak human who couldn't match my strength, but you were learning everything about how I move, how I think." "Yes," Temin admitted. "And when you were ready, you stopped pretending to be weak. I stopped fighting your fight, and started fighting mine." Vorth struggled to his feet with help from the medical team. Despite his injury, he walked over to Temin and extended his uninjured hand. "I owe you an apology," he said formally. "I underestimated your species. I thought strength was the only thing that mattered in combat." Temin shook the offered hand carefully. "Strength matters, but so does intelligence. And patience. And knowing when to use each one." What else should we know about human combat abilities? Instructor Zeal asked. Hyjin and Taemin exchanged glances. There was so much the aliens didn't understand about humans. Their endurance, their ability to fight through pain, their talent for using tools and weapons, their capacity for teamwork under pressure. We're very good at not giving up, Hyjin said simply. Even when things look hopeless, and we're good at learning from our mistakes. Taemin added, every fight teaches us something new. Instructor Korith floated higher, addressing the entire assembly. Today's demonstration has been most educational. We have learned that physical advantages do not determine combat effectiveness. Intelligence, adaptability, and technique can overcome raw strength. She paused, her crystal body pulsing with slow, thoughtful light patterns. This academy trains officers for the Galactic Defense Force. Our mission is to prepare you for real combat. Against real enemies. Sometimes those enemies will be stronger than you. Sometimes faster, sometimes tougher. Her voice became more serious. But if today has taught us anything, it is that victory often goes to the fighter who thinks, adapts, and refuses to give up. These are qualities that every species can develop. The alien cadets looked at the humans in their group with new eyes. No longer did they see weak, fragile beings who needed protection. They saw potential allies who brought different but valuable skills to the team. Training will continue tomorrow, Instructor Zeal announced. But it will be ... adjusted. We clearly have much to learn from each other. As the crowd began to disperse, Vorth approached Taemin one more time. Will you teach me? He asked. Your fighting methods. Taemin smiled. Of course, but you'll have to learn to be patient. Human techniques take time to master. I have time. Vorth replied. And I think I have much to learn about patience. As they walked toward the exit, Hyjin fell into step beside Taemin. Think they understand now? She asked quietly. Some of them do. The others will learn. And us. Do we understand them better now? Taemin thought about that. We're starting to. That's what this place is really about, isn't it? Learning to work together despite our differences, even when those differences include breaking arms. Especially then, Taemin replied with a small smile. Anyone can work with people who are just like them. It takes real skill to work with people who are completely different. Behind them, alien cadets were already forming new training groups, mixing species more deliberately than before. The humans were no longer being assigned to support roles or treated as fragile allies who needed protection. They were being treated as warriors. Different warriors than the galaxy was used to, perhaps, but warriors nonetheless. The Academy had learned something important that day. Sometimes the most dangerous opponent is the one who doesn't look dangerous at all.